She was special, and she was beautiful inside and out.
She said, please, can you just convince him to let me go? She said, I'll do anything, just let me go. And she even offered oral sex. I had her give me oral sex. She gave me oral sex. I fixed myself, I fixed my clothes. I put her back like I found her and went back into the living room and sat down.
And I know how much he wanted to live, because 2 weeks before this happened, he called me and he said, Mom, I sold my motorcycle. I said, Chris, you did? I said, I know how much you love that motorcycle. Why did you sell it? He said, because I want a life. I've got a reason to live now, which was Shannon.
In a quiet neighborhood stood a house that became a chamber of horrors. On a cold January night, a young couple on a date was abducted at gunpoint and brought to this place. What happened inside those walls is a story of unimaginable cruelty. Separated and at the mercy of their captors, they were tortured and violated in ways that defy comprehension. This is the story of their final, terrifying hours, pieced together from the forensic evidence that exposed a den of pure evil hiding in plain sight. If you're ready to look closer, hit the like button and subscribe to join the investigation. I'd love to know where you're joining from, so drop your city and time in the comments. Now the file is open, let's see what's inside. In the quiet suburbs of Knoxville, Tennessee, an ordinary Saturday night was unfolding. It was January 6th, 2007, a date that would soon be etched into the city's memory as a scar, a symbol of unimaginable cruelty. For 21-year-old Shannon Christian and 23-year-old Christopher Newsom, it was supposed to be a simple, uneventful evening, a dinner date followed by a party with friends. It was a night filled with the easy promise that young love offers, a future that seemed to stretch out before them, bright and limitless. But lurking in the shadows of that ordinary night was a darkness so profound, so utterly devoid of humanity, that it would not only extinguish their bright futures, but also cast a long, chilling shadow over the community for years to come. What began as a simple rendezvous would descend into a maelstrom of terror, a nightmare from which they would never awaken. The story of what happened to them is not just a tale of crime. It is a glimpse into the abyss, a harrowing journey through the final terrifying hours of two young lives, meticulously pieced together from the cold, hard facts of forensic science and the haunted recollections of those who were forced to bear witness. The first tremor of fear began subtly, as it often does, a missed call, a message unanswered. By the morning of January 7th, that quiet unease had crescendoed into full-blown panic. Shannon's mother, Dina, felt a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. It wasn't like Shannon to be out of touch. Theirs was a relationship built on constant communication, an open dialogue where no topic was off-limits. Shannon, a bright and energetic senior at the University of Tennessee, was on the cusp of graduation, her life a whirlwind of classes, friends, and her blossoming relationship with Chris. For her to simply vanish was unthinkable. Dina's calls to her daughter's phone went straight to voicemail. Her anxiety mounting, she reached out to Chris's family, hoping for a simple explanation, a reassurance that her fears were unfounded. But the Newsoms had no answers. They too were steeped in a growing worry. Their son, a talented and hardworking carpenter, was also unreachable. When the families first contacted the Knoxville Police Department, they were met with a frustrating but standard protocol. Shannon and Chris were adults. There was no immediate evidence of foul play. Officers advised the frantic parents to begin the search themselves, to check with friends, to retrace their steps. And so they did. A small, desperate army of family and friends mobilized, their hope a flickering candle against a gathering storm. They called hospitals, drove the familiar streets of Knoxville, their eyes scanning every corner, every passing car, praying for a glimpse of Shannon's distinctive Toyota 4Runner or Chris's familiar truck. But the city that had been their home was now a vast, indifferent landscape that offered no clues, no comfort, only a deepening, silent dread. To understand the depth of this tragedy, you must first understand the light that was extinguished. Shannon Christian was a Texan by birth, but a Tennessean by heart. Moving to Knoxville as a child, she grew into a young woman known for her infectious energy and an almost radiant presence. She was the kind of person who could lift the spirits of a room just by walking into it. Her relationship with her mother, Dina, was more than just a mother-daughter bond. They were confidants, best friends. Shannon shared everything from the triumphs of her studies to the budding excitement of her new romance with Chris. She was less than a year from her graduation, a milestone that represented the culmination of years of hard work and the beginning of the rest of her life. Christopher Newsom was the beloved surprise of his family. Born to older parents whose other children were already grown, Chris was a bundle of new energy, a late-in-life gift who was cherished deeply. He had the soul of an athlete and the hands of an artist. A gifted baseball player throughout his youth, his dreams of a professional career were cut short by an injury after high school. Undeterred, he poured his passion and precision into a new craft, carpentry. He became known for his skill, his reliability, and his creative touch in woodworking. He was strong, kind, and just beginning to build a life for himself. Their meeting in 2006 through a mutual friend was serendipitous. A connection sparked, and their relationship began to grow. It was still new in that exciting phase of discovery, but it was quickly becoming serious. Just before that fateful night, Chris had taken a significant step, introducing Shannon to his parents. He had even confided in his father, his voice filled with a quiet certainty that he was falling in love with her. The next step, a meeting between both sets of parents, was on the horizon. But that meeting would never happen. Instead of sharing a meal and getting to know the person their child loved, the parents would be united by a shared, unspeakable grief. The first call between them was not one of happy introductions, but a frantic, tearful exchange from Dina, sharing the terrifying news that both their children were missing. The timeline of their last known moments began to take shape. The evening had started as planned. Shannon went to her friend's apartment at the Washington Ridge apartment complex to get ready for their date. Chris was to pick her up from there. Around 9 p.m., his truck pulled into the complex. He parked it and walked over to where Shannon was waiting in her 4Runner. They sat there for a few moments, two young people in love, sharing a private conversation before heading out for the night. They were completely unaware that they were being watched. From the darkness, 4 pairs of eyes observed them, not seeing 2 people but an opportunity, an easy target. In that single, unguarded moment, as they sat in the supposed safety of a familiar parking lot, their fate was sealed. As the frantic, unofficial search continued, Chris's friends went to the Washington Ridge apartments, hoping to find a clue. What they found only deepened the mystery. Chris's truck was still there, exactly where he had parked it, but Shannon's 4Runner was gone. This was the first concrete sign that something was terribly wrong. Shannon's best friend, meanwhile, was growing more anxious by the minute. Shannon was a no-show at the party they were supposed to attend. She wasn't answering calls, not responding to texts. This wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. Her friend's concerned call to Dina was followed by another, this one from Shannon's manager, asking why she hadn't shown up for her shift at work. Each call was another blow, chipping away at the fragile hope that this was all a misunderstanding. Then the search took its first devastating turn. The call that every parent prays they will never receive came for the Newsoms. A body had been found. It was near a set of railroad tracks off Cherry Street. The description matched their son. On January 7th, they were forced to confront a reality darker than any nightmare. Their bright, talented, loving son, Chris, was dead. The discovery shifted the search for Shannon from a mission of hope to a race against time, fueled by terror. If Chris had been found murdered, what had happened to Shannon? Her family, their hearts shattered, but their resolve hardened, focused their efforts on the area where Chris's body was discovered, desperately combing the desolate landscape for any sign of her. But there was nothing. In their desperation, Shannon's parents turned to a last resort. They contacted her phone service provider, pleading with them to trace her phone, to find its last signal. The company obliged, and the information they provided sent a chill down everyone's spine. The phone's last ping was registered by the Cherry Street cell tower, a location that put her right in the heart of the area where Chris was found. But more than that, it was a neighborhood with a reputation, a place known for high crime, a place where people didn't end up by accident. You went there because you lived there, or you went there for trouble. Armed with this terrifying new information, Shannon's friends and family descended on the Cherry Street area. They fanned out, their search now laser-focused, exploring every street, every alleyway, every shadow. And then they found it. Tucked away on a side street was Shannon's Toyota 4Runner. But it wasn't right. The vehicle, which Shannon kept meticulously clean, was caked in layers of dirt and mud, as if it had been driven recklessly through a field. The inside was even more disturbing. It was as if someone had deliberately tried to erase her identity. The personal touches that made the car hers, a favorite teddy bear, photos of friends, her phone charger, her iPod were all gone. The front seats were pushed all the way back, far beyond where Shannon would have set them. The floor was covered in filth. Even the stickers she had so carefully placed on her windows had been scraped off. The most chilling clue of all, however, was a pack of cigarettes left inside. Neither Shannon nor Chris smoked. It was a foreign object, a clear sign that someone else had been in control of this car and of their lives. With the discovery of the vehicle, the Knoxville Police Department finally and officially took over the investigation. The family's desperate search had yielded the first critical leads. As forensic technicians began to process the 4Runner, they combed the surrounding area for anything out of place. They found an envelope discarded near the SUV. It seemed like a minor piece of trash, insignificant. But in a criminal investigation, nothing is insignificant. Back at the lab, the envelope was processed for fingerprints, and they got a hit. The print belonged to a man named Lamaricus Slim Davidson, a known criminal whose address was listed as 2316 Chipman Street. The address was just 2 blocks from where Shannon's SUV had been abandoned. Suddenly, the investigators had a name, an address, and a clear, terrifying direction to follow. When a team of officers descended on 2316 Chipman Street, the small rental house appeared eerily quiet, abandoned. They breached the door and began a methodical search of the property. The air inside was heavy. Still, as they moved through the small, squalid rooms, they made a discovery that would haunt them for the rest of their careers. In the kitchen, they found Shannon. Her body, lifeless and broken, had been stuffed head first into a large trash can. She was bound, contorted into an impossible position, and sealed inside at least 5 separate trash bags, as if she herself were nothing more than garbage to be discarded. The scene was one of utter desecration. The horror didn't end there. As they continued to search the house, which was rented by Lamaricus Davidson, they found more of Shannon and Chris's belongings. Shannon's purse, her clothes, her shoes, her camera, its memory card filled with photos that had been ripped and partially burned in a crude attempt to destroy them. They also found Chris's things, his beloved baseball caps, his driver's license, other personal items that had been missing. They were all there, packed into the same trash bags as if they were trophies from a night of monstrous conquest. Investigators also recovered shell casings, which they suspected would match the weapon used to end Chris Newsom's life. The house on Chipman Street was not just a crime scene, it was a tomb, a torture chamber that held the final terrible secrets of their last hours. The manhunt for Lamaricus Davidson and his accomplices was now the department's highest priority. The first domino to fall was a man named Eric Boyd, an associate of Davidson's. Under questioning, Boyd, likely seeing the walls closing in, revealed Davidson's location. He was hiding out in a nearby abandoned house. On January 11th, a tactical team swarmed the vacant property. Inside, they found Lamaricus Davidson. They also found a pair of Chris Newsom's brand new athletic shoes and a .22 caliber revolver. He was arrested and taken into custody. During interrogation, Davidson spun a web of lies, offering 5 different, conflicting stories. First, he claimed he'd been gone since Friday and knew nothing about what had transpired in his rental house. When that didn't hold, he tried to pin the entire crime on his brother, Letalvis Cobbins, claiming Letalvis had shown up in Shannon's SUV and that he, Lamaricus, had never even seen the couple. Each story was more desperate than the last, and each one crumbled under the weight of the evidence investigators were rapidly assembling. With an air of defiant arrogance, Lamaricus Davidson made a bold declaration to the detectives he had not been sexually involved with Shannon Christian. He was so confident, in fact, that he insisted there would be no DNA evidence linking him to her. He was wrong. The forensic evidence would not just tell a different story. It would scream the truth. DNA recovered from Shannon's violated body came back as a positive match for both Lamaricus Davidson and his brother Letalvis Cobbins. Their DNA was also found all over her clothing, her jeans, her sweater, her camisole, leaving absolutely no doubt as to their direct, brutal, and intimate involvement in the crime. The full, horrifying picture began to emerge. Lamaricus Davidson was a local drug dealer. On the night of January 6th, he, along with his brother Letalvis Cobbins and their friends George Thomas and Eric Boyd, were looking for a vehicle to carjack. There was no grand motive, no personal vendetta. Chris and Shannon were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, a target of pure, random, predatory evil. The 4 men, guns drawn, swarmed the 4Runner, forcing the terrified couple into the back seat. They bound their hands and drove them to the House of Horrors on Chipman Street. When they arrived, they were met by a 5th accomplice, Vanessa Coleman, Letalvis Cobbins' girlfriend, who was waiting outside. The initial carjacking had now escalated into a kidnapping, and once inside that house, it devolved into something far, far worse. Chris and Shannon were separated. Chris was taken first. What he endured in that house is almost beyond human comprehension. He was subjected to a level of physical and sexual violence that speaks to a profound sickness in his attackers. He was sodomized with an object, believed to be the broken leg of a chair, an act of such violence that it caused severe internal lacerations and bruising. Forensic evidence strongly suggested he was raped by at least one of the men. After 1 to 2 hours of this unimaginable torment, they took him outside. He was barefoot, gagged with socks, and clad only in a t-shirt and his underwear in the cold January night. His hands were still bound, and a dog leash had been wrapped around his neck, a final humiliation. They led him to the nearby railroad tracks. There, they forced him to kneel. They bound his ankles with his own belt and pulled his shirt over his head, blindfolding him. Then the execution began. It was not quick. It was a slow, merciless, methodical act of murder. The first shot from the .22 caliber pistol struck him in the back of the neck, grazing him. He fell forward onto the ground, face down, still alive. The second shot ripped into his spinal cord, paralyzing him. He lay there, helpless, conscious, unable to move. Finally, one of the men placed the muzzle of the gun just above his right ear and fired the final fatal shot into his brain. To cover their tracks, they wrapped his body in a comforter, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire, leaving his charred remains to be discovered the next day. While Chris was being tortured and murdered, Shannon's ordeal continued back at the house. Alone, terrified, and at the mercy of her captors and Vanessa Coleman, she was forced to make a phone call to her father. A chillingly calm performance where she claimed she had changed plans and would be home later. It was the last time her family would ever hear her voice. For the next several hours, she was subjected to prolonged and repeated sexual and physical abuse. She was gang raped by the men. The physical evidence of her injuries told a story of unspeakable cruelty. The frenulum, the small piece of tissue connecting her upper lip to her gum, had been torn away, an injury consistent with her mouth being violently forced open. She was beaten, kicked, and stomped on the head, causing severe head trauma. Deep bruises and hemorrhaging covered her entire body. After hours of this torment, her attackers performed one final chilling act, driven by a cold, calculated desire to destroy evidence. They forced bleach down her throat. They poured the caustic chemical over her genitals, scrubbing her, trying desperately to wash away their DNA, to erase their crimes from her body. After this final defilement, they bound her. They used pieces of curtains and bed sheets to tie her neck to her ankles, forcing her legs against her chest and her head down towards her knees, contorting her into a fetal position. They sealed her head inside a small trash bag. Then they stuffed her, bound and brutalized, into 5 separate trash bags, one over the other, and placed her in the kitchen garbage bin, covering her with sheets and closing the lid. Horrifyingly, the medical examiner determined that Shannon Christian was still alive when they left her there. In the cold, silent darkness of the trash can, she died a slow, agonizing death over the course of 10 to 30 minutes from positional and confined space asphyxiation. She suffocated, alone. The subsequent investigation led police to Lebanon, Kentucky. On January 11th, they located a home where George Thomas, Letalvis Cobbins, and Vanessa Coleman were hiding out. They had been actively monitoring news reports about the case, fully aware that the law was closing in. Inside the house, police found Shannon's bag and more of her clothing, irrefutably linking the group to the scene. When interrogated, Letalvis Cobbins tried to portray himself as a reluctant participant, claiming it was Lamaricus and Eric Boyd who masterminded the carjacking, and that he was merely forced to follow along. He denied ever touching Shannon. Vanessa Coleman went even further, attempting to paint herself as a victim, a hostage held against her will by the men. But a journal found at the scene told a very different story. An entry dated January 9th, written by Coleman, read, "I had one hell of an adventure since I've been in the Big TN. It's a crazy world these days, but I love the fun adventures and lessons that I've learned. It's going to be a long, interesting year." The chillingly casual, almost gleeful tone of the entry, written just days after participating in the kidnapping, torture, and murder of 2 innocent people, revealed a mentality utterly devoid of remorse or empathy. The wheels of justice, though sometimes slow, began to turn. In October 2009, after an 8-day trial, a jury found Lamaricus Davidson guilty on 37 counts, including first-degree felony murder, premeditated murder, robbery, kidnapping, and rape. For his central role in these heinous crimes, he was sentenced to death. He currently sits on death row. George Thomas, one of the original 4 assailants, was also convicted of first-degree murder, robbery, and kidnapping. He received 2 life sentences plus an additional 25 years. Letalvis Cobbins, Davidson's brother, was found guilty of first-degree murder and a host of other charges. His total effective sentence was life without parole, plus an additional 100 years. Both Thomas and Cobbins are serving their life sentences at the Northeast Correctional Complex in Tennessee. Vanessa Coleman, whose journal entry revealed her callous indifference, was convicted of facilitation of murder, kidnapping, and rape. She received a total effective sentence of 35 years and is serving her time at the Tennessee Prison for Women. For over a decade, one perpetrator remained to be fully held accountable for the murders, Eric Boyd. While he had been convicted on federal charges related to the carjacking, he had not faced state charges for his role in the killings. Finally, in August 2019, he stood trial. A jury found him guilty of premeditated first-degree murder, carjacking, robbery, and kidnapping. He received a life sentence for the murder, plus an additional 90 years. The final architect of this nightmare was finally brought to justice. The case of Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom is a stark and brutal reminder of the capacity for human cruelty. It's a story of a chance encounter that led to an explosion of senseless sadistic violence. 2 young lives, full of promise and love, were extinguished for nothing more than a car and the depraved whims of 5 individuals. The justice system delivered its verdicts, imposing the harshest possible sentences on those responsible. But for the families of Shannon and Chris, the sentences can never truly balance the scales. Their loss is permanent, a void that can never be filled. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe the sentences served were just for the unimaginable horror inflicted upon Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Well, that concludes today's video. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who watched this story all the way through. I would love to hear your thoughts on this video in the comments, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'd also like to send a special thank you to everyone who donated and supported this work. Your support means the world to me and gives me the motivation to continue these important investigations for you, my wonderful viewers. There's more on the way, so stay tuned.